Hello, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, whatever time you're viewing this. Welcome to the show. I have a special guest for us today. This is Mark Wheeler, who is running for Senate as a Democrat in Deep Red, Alabama. So, Mark, I'm just going to pass it to you.
That's
Tell us a
right.
little about yourself. Why are you running? Introduce us to you as if we've never met you before.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, my name is Mark Wheeler, and I am running for the United States Senate. More specifically, I'm running for Tuberville's seat, if you're more familiar with him than just the seat name itself. A little bit about me. I am native to Alabama. I was born in Heflin, raised here. I'm from a pretty impoverished, disadvantaged background. My mother struggles really hard with drug abuse and mental illness issues, wholly dependent on Social Security growing up, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, uh, housing assistance, and so on. Um, I grew up knowing that I wanted to be a little bit more in life, but did not have a lot of tools and opportunities to make something of myself. I hammered down, spent a lot of years working in factories, putting in 60, 70, 80 hours a week, uh, pushing myself towards being able to graduate college. So now currently I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and emergency management, and I work in the research and development division for a wiring cable company, designing and developing sustainable polymers. I'm looking to go to the United States Senate because I'm concerned about what the future looks like for my kids. So the transition from poverty to a American for me has taken 7 years of endless work and consistent diligence, being consistently diligent and persevering through a tremendous amount of uh, frustration and difficulty. Looking forward into the future, we are currently at what I believe is the apex of a technological revolution. And I believe that that is going to create a environment where working people are not going to be advantaged. We are going to be disadvantaged. And so, what kind of world does that leave for my children to be able to work in and thrive? Is there going to be clean air? Is there going to be clean water? Are there going to be jobs for them to do? Um, and so, as I look around me, I don't see anyone else stepping up to make that action to secure a future for our children. And so I felt like it was my obligation to do something to create a future that they can thrive in.
So you got the working class background into education, into now politics for obviously very deeply personal reasons, right? We all want what's best for our kids. I think that's like the easiest into politics is like, well, what kind of future is my son going to have? That's
For
something
sure.
that I've found myself thinking of basically nonstop since I had a son, and I know you're probably the same way. Um, Toward that
Absolutely.
future. I'm wondering, what do you see as the future of the Democratic Party, where it was at one point this sort of complicated mix of a white supremacist faction and then a labor faction, and there were some weird overlaps and weird
Sure.
frictions. And then through the 1960s, it becomes the party of civil rights, the party of the working class, the party of social welfare. And what we've seen recently is this shift towards the elite. Democratic voters tend to have higher educations and higher salaries. Democratic voters tend to condense in high cost of living areas in cities. Democratic states are really high cost of living states. I think California comes to mind as the obvious. So, do you see the future of the Democratic
For sure.
Party returning to working class roots? Is it going full steam ahead with like tech and high education? What does your Democratic Party look like when you take office?
So for me personally, I guess within any political party there are multiple factions, right? I consider myself a collaborative Democrat. So in my mind, I believe in the absolute power of humans through collaboration. So I like to believe that the future of the Democratic Party is a collaborative party where people are more focused on working together and obtaining a result that is better than the sum of its parts. Um, but that's an ideal future. Things are always in flux, right? We're all constantly evolving. You and I both, we grow every day, right? And the party changes in that same way. People are always changing. So can I, I don't have a glass ball. I can't just look into the future and say for certain that that's how it will be. But in my mind, I believe that's where it will go.
So you see, when you say collaboration, because that word can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, do you see it more like the various factions? Because there's a conservative faction. I'm thinking back to like Joe Manchin and
Sure.
Kirsten Sinema recently. The conservative faction of the party, the sort of mushy, moderate middle, and then there's this up-and-comer progressive wing that is oftentimes at war with itself, but is very much there. what does collaboration look like between the most conservative and older Democrats and the more progressive and younger Democrats?
Sure. So when I say collaborative, I mean a smattering of all peoples, right, regardless of age or gender or racial or ethnical background. Um, I ideally, yes, a progressive, technologically progressive future, right, where we use our ability to communicate across the world instantaneously to get buy-in from every individual, rather than just having to focus solely on representatives 500 or 600 miles away to make decisions.
I think the common sort of dagger throw that you get from the right, and maybe this is fading, maybe the right has actually moved beyond this as a talking point, and I fear that they have, but you hear, at least you used to hear a lot of like, well, the Republican Party is the party of the average Joe American. The Republican Party freed the slaves. It was the Democrats who did segregation. How do you combat narratives like that into this more collaborative future that you envision?
Well, it's the same reason that the party will change going into the future, that it is different in the past. We all know that there was a party swap, earlier in the American history. Uh, Even my grandmother friends, a Southern Democrat into a Southern Republican, which is part of what makes up the modern day Republican Party.
Mhm.
Um, every group does have a history, and the Democratic Party itself has made mistakes in the past, obviously, right? Driving racial segregation is a good point. But that's not the party of today, right? The Ku Klux Klan doesn't back the modern day Democratic Party, they back the
Mhm.
modern day Republican Party. um so in my mind, a, there is an absolute need to recognize that mistakes like that have been made in the past, and then understanding that going into the future, we look at that history and say, that's wrong. Obviously, we don't let that happen again. And then going into the future, we use that kind of as a guiding light, a moral compass, to know how we need to aim going into the future.
And I think a big part of that future is going to come down to who can capture the first time voter who is turning 18 on an election year. And what we saw with Obama is that he did
Right.
really
I can see.
well with first-time voters. We saw with Biden that he did really well with first-time voters.
Mhm.
And then we noticed in 24 there was this shift, and Gen Z moved substantially. And this is mostly driven by those first-time voters who are turning 18 for the election. This substantial shift to the right, particularly among young men. So, what do you see as drawing young men away from the Democratic Party? And do you have a plan to bring them back or a message to give them
Mhm.
that would give them an alternative to what they saw in 2024?
So this is kind of multifaceted here. So there can be a lot of reasons why anyone's drawn to any specific party. So I've grown up as a working person, and I recognize that unions and collaboration typically is fostered under the Democratic umbrella, and that's largely why I've been attracted to it. And also my deep sense of empathy, right? Like I can recognize that a gay person still loves who they love, right? It doesn't matter that they're the same sex. Um, and so, bastardizing on somebody like that or hating them for that is wrong. I can perceive that. And so for me, falling under the Democratic umbrella has been very easy because I can, I guess, fit in is the right word. Um, but there are a lot of young individuals that are coming into the job market. They're not finding jobs. They're not finding an easy start to life. And with me, whereas I saw my path to a future was going into a factory and working like hell to make something of myself, to buy a home and start a family and start building a life while also going to college. That was my path forward. But a lot of younger people don't see that as an option because factories are closing. They're not prevalent jobs anymore. And so they do have unlimited access online where they can see influencers like Andrew Tate, for instance. And so they get a lot of this really toxic masculinity that is sold to them. It's packaged in such a way that makes them feel like there are people that are lesser than you, and it is their fault that you don't have the things that you should be able to have,
Mhm.
when in reality that's not true, right? I mean, most people can't achieve the life that they deserve because of the state of our economy. It's not the nature of another person over here that has nothing to do with you. It's the economy around you and the economic structure that the government has built around our lives.
I think to your economic answer, this narrative of what does work look like for someone who's graduating high school or graduating college and they're having trouble in the labor market. There's been a variety of answers to that question, and none of them have caught all the way yet. So we saw several years ago with Andrew Yang's proposal of a universal basic income system. And I'm seeing that crop more and more as AI shifts from being this neat little novelty to actually being a disruptive force in the labor market as a UBI system. We see through people like
For
Bernie
sure.
Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez expansions, dramatic expansions of the social welfare state to try and catch people as they fall out of the labor market and hold them over until they can find their way back in. From the right,
Yes.
the answer has been make it harder for women
Yes.
and migrants to work. And hopefully that will drive up wages because there are fewer available employees to pick from. What is your answer to that
Right.
economic anxiety that a lot of young people are feeling?
So that's actually an interesting take. I hadn't considered really that that is the overarching message of the Conservative Party, but it does almost feel that way, right? Like it's trying to drive back to a nuclear family.
Mhm.
Uh, but to your point and to your question, I firmly believe that building social assurances, a social safety net for everyone, not just men, especially not just white men. Um, I think that makes more sense in a society where we consider all people to be equal and to be free. It makes sense to me that every person should be given the same opportunities. And so, if we recognize now that going into the future that AI will obsolete a significant number of jobs, then it does make sense to be proactive on that, right? And to create those social safety nets in advance so that people are not losing their homes. They are not dying to exposure. They are not dying from curable diseases just because they no longer have access to healthcare. Um, because if we do advance into a future where AI and robotics do supplant most of us in the workforce, um, we will eventually see a French style revolution, right? Because people will not just die peacefully. They will eventually reach a point where we do recognize enough is enough, and then there's a massive overturn, and then maybe tremendous fallout, and that's a very violent future. And I don't think that we have to go that path. In my mind, it does make more sense to, like you said, follow what Bernie and AOC has started laying the ground for. And building those proactive social nets to take care of people. And that's every individual, not just men, so that women are required to stay with them and not alienating migrants because they weren't born here or because their grandparents weren't born here. My family immigrated here about 150 years ago. So, I am a migrant to this land just like most everyone else is.
That piece of who are the benefits for what we're seeing, what I'm noticing on the far right, and I'm even hesitant to use the phrase far right because it's just like it feels like it's all of them now, is this more blood and soil rhetoric of the social welfare benefits are fine unless they're being abused by the undesirables, being abused by the undeserving. How do you feel like we can thread that needle for
Mhm.
people who are benefiting from social welfare programs and yet still consistently vote against expanding them because they feel like they're going to be abused, even when the data shows really consistently social welfare programs are not abused in any large way. And yet that piece of the data seems to have just over so many rural voters, particularly. So how do you tell those people, or rather, how do you present to those people that the benefits that everyone needs aren't being abused? You don't have to worry about like your tax dollars being wasted on that stuff.
Right. So in my mind, I think that there's not really an easy path to make that happen. So we know absolutely that most people using social programs are not actually abusing them, right? Like they are used in a way that they are needed. If we come to the point where we recognize that everyone that is using these programs are using them in a way to fulfill a need that they have, then as a society, I think it will be easier to ease some of that concern and some of that frustration. But at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to can you teach someone to not hate somebody, or can you
Mhm.
teach them to love somebody? And that is incredibly hard to do. You can teach people to hate, but teaching them to not hate is difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think realistically, the best option there is starting with children at young ages, right? Teaching them that people are different and why they're different, and not trying to sow a culture of hate within them, but a culture of acceptance. You know, it's okay that his skin is a different color. It's okay that their hair is different or whatever. Um, in Japan, for instance, I think their whole first year of study for young children is not actually academic study, but it's a study around how to take care of yourself, how to wipe your butt, how to clean up after yourself, how to take care of the world around you, and how to operate within society, how to talk to people, you know, respect and culture. And so maybe here in the States, we could explore something like that, something similar, right? Teaching people to clean up after themselves. Maybe the result is cleaner cities. But then also we teach them how to be accepting and how to communicate feelings and frustrations, you know, in an appropriate way that doesn't result in lash out and violence and all these other negative effects that we see from sowing hate and division.
So you think it's more because as someone in an education background, I'm really torn on like, is this something that schools are best equipped to do, or is there some way to connect with families and say, well, the families are actually better equipped to offer those sort of social training features versus the school system, or the school system versus the families. Do you feel like this is a thing that can maybe not be solved, but be mitigated by education policy, or is there some other policy direction you would pursue to try and ease that, um, I don't know how to phrase it exactly, social friction that people feel, particularly young people feel?
I think we would be most successful if we attack it on multiple fronts. I do think I don't think that I do not think that we could answer it wholly just through educational uh, changes, right? You can't only fix it at school because that would only impact the kids that are starting now and growing up, right? That doesn't fix the culture for the entire rest of the country. And so if we started with young kids and we taught them and we keep that up for a period of 150 years, then society as a whole, at least for children that have adopted it and accepted it over what they're learning at home, um, then we would see that change. But if we can attack it on multiple fronts, right? We start with young children, and we have a marketing focus, right, from our government. Maybe the CIA gets involved, and we get them to find a way to foster love and unity instead of instead of division and hate. Then maybe we can get buy-in from parents and families at home, small communities, right, and get them to start pushing more towards unity and collective functionality.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope everyone watching at home got to know Mark a little bit better. And Mark, how can we find you? How can we get in touch with you? How can we follow you on social media?
Yeah, for sure. So my website is the easiest way to find me. So it's markwheelerforsenate.com. Just type it into Google and it'll pop up. If once you're on there, you'll be able to find my cell phone number. If you just really want to talk to me directly, there's also email and contact information. You can sign up to attend one of our barbecue events. Jonathan, I hope you're going to come to one.
I intend to.
And then, of course, you can find all of my social media links also right there. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Reddit. Reddit was the heart of my campaign, start of my campaign.
And everyone, thank you so much for sticking around. You are going to see that link to Mark Wheeler's website in the description below. If you would like to support this podcast or support me, then you can check me out on Patreon, which is also going to be linked below, or you can view my science fiction novels on Amazon, which will also be linked below. Thank you so much for sticking around. Mark, thank you so much for coming and being a part of the conversation. Hope to have you go on again soon.